So today we're going to install the new rear sway bar on the Acura CL Type-S. This new sway bar is actually enhanced over the OEM one in two ways. First, this is a larger diameter. It's 24 millimeters in diameter. It's also a solid core as opposed to the OEM, which is a hollow core and thinner. We also have two brackets here. One, which is the furthest away, is your softer setting, and the inside would be your firmer setting. So the recommendation is to start with the softer setting and then work your way to the more progressive setting, which is ironically the name of this bar. So today we're going to install this. We won't be driving it, unfortunately, but we will get this all set up for summer, and then there will be a follow-up of my opinion on this sway bar, and if I actually think that this sway bar enhances the drivability of the Acura CL. One question may be, well, why aren't you doing both the front and the rear? Well, this car has a limited slip differential, and the problem with the car, with front-wheel drive cars, isn't that they have a lot of front-end sway. So it's actually a little unnecessary with front-wheel drive cars to address the front sway bar. It is actually more important to address the rear sway bar because that is where you actually tend to get a little bit of understeer into the front end of the car when you're driving into turns. It's not because of the front not being locked in, but it's actually because of the rear wanting to kick out or come out of the turn, which then points the car in an unnatural way. It seems a little weird, but that's actually what happens. So a lot of people will do front sway bars and rear sway bars, but if you do your research, the front sway bar is largely unnecessary with front-wheel drive cars. It's actually the rear sway bar. So that's where this is going to come into play. So the first step in removing the sway bar is to disconnect the end links here. If you see, it actually attaches to the top and to the bottom, but to the bar only on the bottom. So we have to remove both sides, left and right, and we have to remove the sway bar bushings, which is a little difficult to see, but that's where the bushing is for the rear sway bar. You can already tell that this sway bar is significantly thinner than the new one that's going to be going in here soon. So we're going to take this sway bar off, put new bracketry on, and hopefully help align this car a little bit better into the turns. Hopefully we don't need to do anything further than remove the bushing, remove the links, and pull the bar out. In some examples though, it can be a little bit difficult, and it may require you to actually pull the exhaust apart or address it by taking the wheel off. Hopefully we'll be able to just drop this bar out. So here's something interesting I wasn't really intending on running into. The last person who did the bushings on the sway bar in the rear stripped the nut. I'm hoping they didn't also strip the inside of the threads on the attachment point, because if they did, that's going to make this job a little bit more difficult. Great. So hopefully you can see this. What we're doing right here is chasing the threads with this 8 millimeter 1.2 pitch bit right here, which will then allow us to put in the new bolt, which will hopefully just insert right in and we won't have to do anything more. But it is a shame that we have to do this because somebody just over torqued it and stripped it all out. So well, this is how we have to fix things sometimes on older cars. So here's the difference between the factory and the new one, the progressive suspension sway bar in the rear. One, you can see that the OEM one is pretty knackered up and rusting, but there's a significant weight difference between the two. This is clearly a thinner and hollow compared to this. So this will be very interesting to see what we end up feeling as a result of installation. What I'm going to do now is, since the threads were definitely ripped out, I'm going to chase the threads on the attachment point on their one side where the bushing attaches. It's unfortunate, but these things do happen sometimes. People over torque things, people don't use the right tools, end up ripping the threads out. So that will be the next part. I got the new sway bar into position. As you can see here, I had to remove the driver's side muffler. It was definitely easier to get it into position with that detached. I did struggle a bit to get it into position with it on, and so I just gave up. I noticed that I was, scratching and marring the new sway bar. Okay, so here's our new sway bar all installed. It's a little bit dark under here. Apologize for the poor lighting. But as you can see, we have the new progressive anti-sway bar in here, attached with new bracketry and hardware. We were able to fix this one that was stripped out. So now we'll have to see what it's like in the summertime when we're able to drive this. Hopefully we'll get some improved handling and performance. Just take note that the muffler is easy to remove, and it's going to make your life a lot easier to get this sway bar in position. So that's the conclusion of the progressive sway bar rear kit on the 2003 Acura CL Type-S. In conclusion, I would say that this is a very basic DIY friendly modification that anybody could perform on their Acura CL. It only took basic hand tools and basic DIY knowledge to install this kit. We did run into one small issue, which was the fact that somebody had stripped the bolt and the threads out on the sway bar bushing bracket. If you don't have that issue, it's a pretty straightforward installation process. It can be accomplished with basic hand tools. Now, depending on the situation, you could easily install this within an hour. Now, it took me a little bit longer than that because I had to chase the threads on the bolt hole for that bushing bracket. If it wasn't for that, I could have easily accomplished this in less than an hour. It took me a little bit longer than an hour. I would recommend removing the driver's side muffler to make the installation of the larger and new progressive sway bar that much easier. It could be accomplished without the removal of the muffler, but considering how much time and effort it would take you to do so, and how little effort it is to remove the driver's side muffler, I would highly recommend that you consider that as an option to make your installation process that much easier. So, in conclusion, we won't be able to review the performance of the new sway bar until the summertime, but we will take note that this is probably the only modification to the suspension that will occur between now and when this car comes out of storage. So we can definitely pair up the performance before and after very easily. There will be a road video that will show the difference between the two. And I will go over that in detail about what I feel and what I think about the performance rear suspension sway bar kit.